Before I get started, I just want to say a bit of a thank you to people that were sort of checking in on me yesterday. I had some really lovely messages, had some phone calls. I think clearly I was a bit too grumpy on the post-match review. I'm absolutely fine, by the way, but thank you so much for people for checking. It was just one of those days, honestly. I had some car trouble, traffic jam, I was late to pick my kids up, my Wi-Fi stopped working, I had a problem with my phone, Wi-Fi not working is a big deal. Hammers chat on match days as well. I'd unexpectedly go. Anyway, it was just one of those things. I had some cancellations. I got stuck in a call centre. It's just one of those things that one of those days everybody goes through. And even I was grumpy. I was in a bad mood. Frustrated anyway. And then I sit down. I watch my team go 1-0 up against Man City. I think, oh, okay, at least the day's turning out. We're gonna win the league. And then, do you know what? So it was just that. But I'm fine. I'm absolutely fine. Thank you very much for checking, everybody. So this the morning after a good night's sleep. The Wi-Fi is getting sorted, it's got sorted, should I say? So the world's a happy place now. But it did bring up some questions and allow me to sort of reflect a little bit on what's going on at West Ham. And I think I got, as I say, caught up in the fervour of a good start to the season. But it got me thinking, sort of how far are we away, not from beating the likes of Man City or being better than them in terms of the league table, but actually being able to give them a bloody nose. And I think it's relevant, bearing in mind we've got Liverpool next as well. And I think a lot of this we'll find out a lot more after the Liverpool game, because it's away, it's at Anfield, and Liverpool aren't quite as good as Manchester City. So it's going to be quite interesting to see where we are. And there was that old adage about the start of the season. You can't tell anything at the start of the season. Some people used to say until 10 games have been played, and some people used to say until Christmas. But you know what? They're much of a muchness. What they're saying is, as a barometer, as a cross-section of how your team's doing, wait until quite a few games have been played. And I couldn't help but look at it yesterday and think, well, what went wrong for us yesterday? Well, a lot went right. And I can't help but feel that if Antonio's not 100% on his game, that system doesn't work at all. Not at all, actually. Even now, that's not all. That system doesn't work against the very, very best teams. Because the other people who are meant to be doing the attacking, like Jarrod Bowen, they're shackled. Very much. You had Jarrod Bowen tracking back. He was shackled, trying to help Vladimir Coufal deal with a really, really talented player in Jeremy Doku. And that doesn't help. So we often had a situation in that game, particularly in the first half, which ironically, obviously we took the lead, but particularly in that first half, where Antonio was the wrong side of the halfway line. You know what I mean? He was the defensive side of the halfway line. And I do think it was a bit of a hindrance. Now, that if he's absolutely on it, then that's fine. But he wasn't. He wasn't in full beast mode. And I think we've got to be truthful about him here. Antonio is never always in beast mode. Antonio, I think it's fair to say, and please correct me if you think I'm wrong on this, I think Antonio beast mode, even at his best, we're looking at a third, I might be slightly wrong, but about a third of the games each season, you might get Antonio in beast mode. When he's not, it makes it really, really hard to play that way. Which leaves us with two things. One of them, I think, is probably far easier than the other. That's to change the system. I think we saw a bit of that. Gio did a video earlier on this morning talking about Moyes going for it. I think the change in system or the switch in personnel with what we got is Jarrod Bowen going up front. I think that's plan B, basically. And we saw how that was going to look after he eventually made the substitutions, David Moyes. I don't particularly think that works when we're playing high-end teams. I really don't. I do think Jarrod Bowen's going to score some goals this season from a centre-forward position, and I don't blame David Moyes at the moment for making that his sort of go-to way. I'd much rather see that than Danny Ings, for instance. And I do wonder if we're sort of biding time for Divine Mubama and, of course, Callum Marshall to come through now. I think it was the under-21s played against Celtic, maybe Friday. Really good game. Really good performances from those players. I think they're both going to be high-level footballers, both those youngsters. And in many respects, I'd prefer to see Mubama up there than Danny Ings. But I do understand Jarrod Bowen being the go-to guy there. But I just don't think it's an effective tactic against those top teams. And as I mentioned yesterday, everything has got to go right for you when you play those. So what's the next improvement for West Ham in terms of getting a little bit more out of everything? And I do think it is that striker. There's no surprise there at all. And I think we could have got a lot of strikers, but I think in the end we didn't pull the trigger. And I think a lot of that is to do with something I'll discuss in another video, because I really want to sort of look into this overdraft facility that we've taken out. I think with skin. And when I say skin, I mean I don't mean like you and I, we can't pay electricity bill. I'm talking like skin in terms of being able to go out and spend 30, 40 million pounds on a striker. I think it had to be just right. I think there's a lot of teams on the continent who would look at West Ham and think, well, we'd like to be as skint as it. I do think we probably are in it, actually. I think all Premier League teams are probably in the... If you're regular in the Premier League, you're going to be somewhere in the top 20 richest clubs in world football. I absolutely believe that. Brighton, little old Brighton, been in the Premier League so long that the way they trade and the rest of it, they're one of the richest clubs in world football. So, yeah, I mean, there's people far worse off than West Ham, don't get me wrong, but I just don't think we've got the money to go out there and buy this striker. And I think it was no better highlighted than when Antonio went through, and it was Paqueta, I think, with the pass was beautiful ball forward, played through, and that was it. It was his one chance, and he took a heavy touch, and the chance was gone. The keeper came out and collected it, and it's that little bit of being absolutely clinical. But I actually don't think there are that many strikers who can do what Antonio did, because what you'd be asking of a striker in that system would be to actually, you're going to have to defend a lot. You're going to be stood the wrong side of the halfway line. I felt a little bit, I don't want to be overcritical about West Ham on Moyes. I do think we lost to the better team, all right? But I felt a little of too many times we would be sitting deep and defending deep, and we would win the ball back and there would be no out ball because Antonio was too deep. And I just sometimes look at it and think, okay, Moyes, just, right, if you've got to have like the goalkeeper and 9 people defending, fine. But just leave one up. Leave one up. Pardew, it's not just Moyes. Pardew used to, and if you're a regular watcher of the channel, I love Alan Pardew. I really do. But when we were defending corners, he'd leave nobody up, and it used to frustrate the hell out of me because it kills that counter-attack, that opportunity to spring on the break, or at least do it quickly. You're going to have an exchange of passes, or someone's going to have to hold on to the ball before and allow time for someone to get up there. If someone's up there, you've got an out ball. And I think for too many times in open play, certainly, we would win the ball back. And Antonio was in the centre circle, but this side of it, like the defender's side of it. And it was, so hard then to spring and attack. So what you're asking for somebody to do in those big games is to sit back, soak it up, and be able to operate wide. And then when you get into that goal-scoring position, which Antonio did when he was played through by Paqueta, is be clinical enough to dispatch the shot and get your shot off, and you hope by and large they're going to score. I don't think there's that many of those strikers around. I really don't. And I think for that reason, we probably turned down a few strikers who we could have got. I think David Moyes does have in his mind who he thinks can play those systems. And if he can't get them, and in the end he couldn't get Youssef En-Nesyri, and I think certainly Armando Broyo is another one he thinks can play that system. I probably can play that system, by the way. He just hadn't shown any sort of significant recovery from injury to be able to do that. And I think if he can't get the players that he wants, then he's not going to get a bit part player. Because we've seen with Danny Ings what a bit part player can do, and that's not a lot, really. It has to be said, but I don't want to dig him out overly. But yeah, so I think we're a striker short. I really do, and there's nothing. I don't think there's any problem saying that. But I think the thing is, we're going to be absolutely fine in terms of a top 10 finish, and I think we can hopefully get out the group in Europe, and that's pretty damn good. It is pretty damn good. But what have we got to do for that next level? I just think it's a slow building process that we're dealing with at the moment. It's going to be really interesting to see come the end of the season if that process gets to run its course, because I look at it. I'll deal with it in another video. What I think we need, because I think there's 3 positions, including the striker, that very much make the difference here. It's going to be interesting to see if David Moyes gets the chance to see that through. It's going to be interesting. His contract's up at the end of the season. I think if he gets us to if he gets us into Europe again, he gets a job. I think it's as simple as that. It's as simple as that. He gets a new contract. But it's going to be very, very interesting, particularly looking at managerial situation and the ownership model and everything to see. Be interested to see what David Moyes or the club want to do in terms of player transfers going forward to just get us up sort of one more level. Anyway, that's it. What I would like to do though is point you to our Patreon. Basically, our Patreon, we're running a free trial on Patreon. Gives you a little free trial of our Mild Addicts. And what's Patreon? Patreon is our it's our third Hammers Chat channel. Myself and Gio will be joining. Well, not join anyone. It'll be me and Gio tomorrow doing our player ratings. We will dissect the Man City game a little bit more. It's a chance for you to join in. It gives us our generic player rating at the end of the season. Basically, our generic organic Hammer of the Year, should I say? We got Hammerlytics on there, which I think is absolutely a great show, amazing show. Gives you a chance to really sort of delve into the tactics and the nuances of everything that's at West Ham. We've got opposition previews from Gio. We got 2 spanners and 1 hammer. We got our naked podcast, which is me and Gio. We are clothed, but we discuss things that are not West Ham. Basically, two grumpy men moaning. I'll have a lot of moans, by the way, in the next one because as I said, it's a pretty crappy old day yesterday. Really, there's loads and loads of stuff going on. We've got the Anton Ferdinand podcast, loads and loads and loads of extra content, and of course, you do get a discount of our online store. So if you're thinking of going on the online store, which is hammerschatstore.com, might be worth you while joining Patreon first because you get, depending on which tier you join, up to 30% discount in our online store. Anyway, there you go. That's all I've got to say for today. I'm going to watch a little bit of football today. Rugby World Cup later as well. I don't know if any of you... I don't even know how many of you watch the rugby. I quite like a bit of rugby union, actually. But anyway, I'll catch up with you tomorrow.